That's us now. Okay, I'll just read out the suggestion of people in attendance at the Social Work Resources Committee, and I have Councillor John Bradley. I can't see Councillor Councillor Brogan in the meeting. No. Councillor Robert Brown, Councillor Archie Buchanan. I've got a message Councillor Brogan can't get in. I'll get IT to contact him to try and sort that. Got Councillor Archie Buchanan, Councillor Calicus, Councillor Campbell, Andy Carmichael, Maureen Chalmers, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Mary Donnelly. I've got Councillor Donnelly in the meeting. Don't see Councillor Donnelly. I have Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Holford. I've got apologies for Councillor Horsham. Councillor Loudon. Yeah, I've got Councillor Loudon. Councillor Lowe. I don't see Councillor Lowe in the meeting.
The inquiry is investigating matters.
Okay, I've got Councillor McClymont, Councillor MacDonald, Councillor McGavigan, Councillor McGuigan, Councillor Nailon. Apologies for Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nugent's in attendance. Don't have Councillor Ross. I have Councillor Walker and Councillor Watson's in the meeting. I've also as substitutes, I've got Councillor Horn as substitute for Councillor Horsham and Councillor Lockhart as substitute for Councillor Nelson. I'll hand you back to the chair now, thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. Before we go into declaration of interest, I'd just like to draw the committee's attention to the fact that this is Val's last social work committee meeting, and she's made a significant contribution, very significant contribution to driving social work forward, and particularly during the past year, during this terrible time that we've all been going through. I'll leave a few minutes at the end for acknowledgements for anybody who wants to make an acknowledgement at the end, but just to bring your attention to the fact that Sal's there, and we'll give her a wee round of applause before we start. Thank you. Thank you. Any declaration of interest? No. Item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 20th of January as a true and accurate reflection. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 15. Records that Councillor Kalikes left the meeting. I was actually removed by somebody at that point in the meeting, so my departure should also be minuted. I also noticed that the minute mentions debates and concerns that the statement did not include male victims. I also object to the terminology employed within that. Item 18, under urgent business. I actually raised the fact at the end of the meeting that I'd been removed by somebody and asked for an investigation. That appears to have not been recorded either. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Eric?
Yeah, it sort of follows on exactly from what Lynn was saying. I've raised this point several times at various committees along the line, but we had a discussion that took, what was it, half an hour, maybe more, on this one subject, item 15, particularly. It's summed up in 4 lines and covers only one point. This isn't really a minute of the meeting. This is just a note of what was on the agenda with a very minor comment. So I'm rather concerned that these are, on an ongoing basis, not really a true record of the meeting that was held.
Tracy?
Yeah, just to explain, I tried to reflect that there was concerns raised, but the purpose of the minute is really to put what the report's asking for and record the decision accurately. We tried, obviously, if there's an important discussion like that, to reflect it, and obviously officers agreed to take that forward and deal with it in terms of the launch of the position statement. In terms of Councillor Nayland's point about urgent business, I didn't really consider that to be urgent business because it was nothing for the committee to deal with. So obviously I responded to the councillor, and through IT we have tried to resolve that issue, and obviously today we have put controls in place where it's only myself that can mute or remove anyone from the meeting. But in terms of business of the meeting, I don't think that would really be considered as urgent business because it was not an item put before the committee to make a decision on. I hope that answers your questions.
It still doesn't address the fact that my departure is not recorded, whereas Councillor Kalike's departure from the meeting is recorded.
I'm sure that'll be corrected, Lynn. Okay.
Yeah, so just to come in on that as well, there was a few members who were come in and out, and it was like seconds and minutes between. I think, Councillor Nayland, you were out of the meeting for, I'd need to check back, but it was just a few seconds, like 19 seconds or something. You come back in quite quickly. So we would record that you'd left the meeting. Maybe if you left during an item and the item finished and you didn't return until the next item, but because it was so short and the same thing was happening to a few members, we didn't record that as leaving the meeting as such because it was for such a short period of time. If that makes sense.
I would still like the fact recorded because it was malicious removal.
Okay,
Thank you.
Record that.
There's no evidence to back that up, Lynn. It was
no, I've been through this with
malicious intent. I don't think there's malicious intent, Lynn. So I think I've been
through this with IT Chair. There is no way that even Microsoft can log whether someone's been lost through leaving the meeting voluntarily themselves or whether they've been removed. There's no way of actually proving it. It was just the message that flashed up.
There's also no way of saying it's malicious either. So please,
right, fine.
Well, the fact
remains, I left the meeting and that should have been recorded. Thank you.
Right, Katie.
It's okay, Chair. You actually covered it yourself there. I'm not happy with the implication that somebody else in the meeting had removed another councillor.
Yes. Thanks, Katie. Right, we'll move on to item 3. It's the revenue budget monitoring for 2021 for the period of 1st of April 2020 to the 29th of January 2021, pages 17 to 26. And Hazel will take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. The purpose of the report again is to provide information on the actual expenditure against the budget for social work resources, and the period, as Chair said, covers 1st of April 2020 to 29th of January 2021. That's our financial period 11, and also to provide you a forecast for the year end to 31st of March 2021. This is the 4th report we've brought to committee for financial year 2021. If I could move you down to section 5 of the report, we note there that we have now completed our formal probable outturn exercise, and that's indicating that we're forecasting that there'll be an overspend of 0.379 million against the annual budget. That's relating then to the additional costs incurred for COVID-19, but only in the budget elements which are not delegated to the IJB and therefore are not funded by the Scottish Government via the mobilisation plan. The Council is considering all of those costs and accumulating that and reporting on that as part of the probable outturn position. In terms of the position then at 29th of January 2021, there's an overspend position of 3.14 million against the phased budget. Just to remind you how we're dealing then with the additional COVID costs, those incurred in adults and older people social care side. So those are the services that are devolved to the Integrated Joint Board. We include those in a mobilisation plan, which we submit to Scottish Government, and they use that to allocate funds to the Health and Social Care Partnership. Again, the types of expenditure in there are additional beds to help facilitate the discharge from hospital, additional support for carers, additional PPE, and also some staff overtime. So, as at the 29th of January, the additional costs incurred on those types of things, and also the income from the Scottish Government, total 15.812 million. You'll see details of that in Appendix B. Excuse me. As well as those extra costs, we've also lost some income from services which we can't provide during the emergency, and also there were some proposed savings for the year 2021 that we haven't been able to fully achieve. So that's an additional 1.275 million as at 29th of January. That's included in the Adults and Older People Services Appendix D. So to get that full cost, we need to take those two figures together. So that's 17.087 million. That includes accrued costs that we haven't actually spent yet at that point in time. And just in terms of the money we'd received in, so as at the 29th of January, we'd had in funding of 11.010 million from Scottish Government, and that relates to the amount that we had invoiced for the actual spend as at that point in time. The report says we will invoice. We have now invoiced for the balance that at that point in time, which was 6.077 million, and we fully expect we'll get that. The Scottish Government continue to advise all reasonable costs incurred will be reimbursed. So the appendices through A through to F provide further detail on that financial position. If I could refer members back to section 2 of the report. Ask you to note the overspend of 0.314 million as at 29th of January. Note our forecast overspend of 0.379 million for the year end, and also if you could approve the proposed amendments within the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. Any questions? Robert?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's maybe my following the report on the 0.341 or 0.379 overspend provision, which is not in the IJB and which is related to COVID, if I've understood it correctly. What are we being told about this? Are we getting this back from the Scottish Government, or are likely to get it back, or are we not? The report's slightly confusing to my simple mind in understanding the position on that.
Yeah, apologies for the confusion. I have to say it's quite confusing for us, and obviously because social work is split across the IJB and the non-delegated services. So in common with the rest of the council's fund, so I think if you're on other committees, there will be reports that say there's COVID expenditure, and we're highlighting that as overspends at the moment. So that 3.14 at the moment, 3.79 at the end, will be is accumulated with all of the other council costs, COVID costs, and there is a plan. I know centrally Paul has a plan for how that will be funded. My understanding is that there is money from the government to cover that, but we've made the decision to show it as overspend at the current point in time, so that there's visibility of the actual costs of COVID. But then there'll be a separate report, I suspect, at Executive Committee, just showing all those totals in there, and also showing the offsetting income that's come from the government. I think a lot of the stuff that has come from government, excluding the IJB stuff, is related to particular types of expenditure. So it's just been pulled together in a slightly different way, but the anticipation is that that will be also covered from additional funding from government. Thanks.
Jim?
Thanks, I come back at that slightly, John, before you press on that one.
Okay, but Robert?
Yeah, thank you. It's just the sort of the two explanations. I mean, on the one hand, Hazel said Paul has a plan, which I suppose is this the flexibility we're given, and on the other hand, she said we're expected all to be met by the government. Can I just probe that a little bit, because I wasn't entirely clear what the position is. I appreciate there's no guarantee at the moment, but are we expecting the whole lot of that overspend to be met by the government? Is that the kind of intention at the end of the day?
I'm probably not being absolutely clear, because to be honest, I'm not absolutely clear myself, so I don't have that oversight of the full position. But my understanding, the last I heard, was that it would be covered, because you're right, there's been a lot of extra flexibilities in that. I can maybe take that back offline and double check with Paul and Jackie, and just let you know what the position is expected to be.
That'd be great. Sorry to be pressing on that, but it's not an insignificant amount of money. I just want to be clear of the position. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Right, Robert. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. It's actually in relation to Appendix B, the payment to contractors. Now, I know there's a variance explanation underneath, but it's a bit bland, if I can say that. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a wee bit more detail as to the type of contractors that are involved here and the type of services which are being provided, because obviously this is quite a substantial overspend.
Thanks, Councillor. I would just note that it's an overspend because it is COVID costs. There's no budget at all there. So there's various elements in there. We make sustainability payments to external contractors. So that's again via the mobilisation plan. Some of the expenditure in there is not expenditure on council services, but because of the way the mobilisation plan works, if trying to think, home care, external contractors or care homes may be in financial difficulties because of COVID, and we have to come to the council and tell us what additional funding they require, and that is sitting in within there. And the income, we get that income in there. So it's almost a kind of third party payment. There's also costs we incur ourselves, like the additional intermediate care beds are in there to help facilitate hospital discharge. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Alan.
Just to mention there about the home care, I thought the home care workers and all that were promised the £500, and understand the nurses have been paid, and yet we've got home care workers out there day in, day out, doing personal care and everything. We don't see any sign of the £500.
I think that's been processed. I think that's been processed, Alan, and it's not in the paper. It's not in the paper, Alan. Right.
Oh, home care was mentioned. I just thought it was finance.
No, in the paper, Alan.
Okay. Thank you.
Moving on, item 4, capital budget monitoring for the period the 1st of April 2020 to 29 January 21, pages 27 to 30.
Thank you, Chair. If I take that one, if that's all right. So agenda item 4 then looks at the social work capital monitoring position. Again, similar to revenue, it's the 4th report for the current financial year and reflects the period to 20th of January, as the Chair said, and that's accounting period 11. In addition, for the first time this year, the report also details the predicted spend position for 2021. Section 3 of the report provides a background to the programme and advises committee that the budget for the year is £844,000, and there's been no change to that budget allocation since we last reported to committee back in January. Section 5 gives you the details of the financial implications, with a breakdown in Appendix A of the report on page 29, showing the 2 main projects we have for the resource, care facility and community alarms project. Section 5.1 notes the resources total programme for the year then is the 844, with 96,000 being spent to the 29th of January. Section 5.2 details the outturn position against that revised budget, and we're looking at spend at the moment of 0.6 million, so 600,000 or so, and that's an underspend of 244,000 in the current year. The majority of that's in relation to the timing of spend in terms of the projects where we require budget in next financial year rather than this year. And Section 5 goes on to give a bit of detail in terms of the reasons why, and really we're noting that a number of projects across the council and in social work have been impacted by COVID-19 and the ongoing lockdowns and restrictions that we're having to work within. And any underspend that we do incur this year, just as usual with capital, can be carried forward into next financial year. It's a bit more flexible than the revenue spend. So if I can refer committee back to the recommendations in Section 2 of the report, and ask that committee note the social work resources budget of 844,000, spend achieved to date as at 29th of January of 96,000, and an anticipated outturn for the financial year of 600,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any questions? Can we read the recommendations at 2? Thank you.
Great.
Item 5, workforce monitoring, November and December 2020, pages 31 to 38, and Eileen McPeak will take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this is the standard workforce monitoring report containing information for November and December 2024 social work resources. So section 4.1 outlines attendance statistics for committee, and the absence at December 2020 was 7.7% for the resource, which is an increase of 0.3% since the previous month and 2.1% higher than the council-wide figure. This translates to an annual average figure for the resource for 2021 of 6.5% compared to a council-wide figure of 4.4%. In relation to COVID-related absences, at the beginning of February, the council-wide absence rate was 5.65, with 1.53% of that relating to COVID, sickness absence and special leave. Section 4.2 states that there was 236 occupational health referrals made during the period. Section 4.3 outlines that there was 8 accidents and incidents during the period. And Section 4.4 states there was 4 disciplinary hearings, 6 grievances and no dignity at work issues raised during the period. And Section 4.5 shows that there was 11 leavers during the period, and of these 36% completed exit interviews. Appendix 2.8A outlines that there was 33 posts that became vacant during the period, and managers indicated that 29 of these are being filled. One will be filled on a fixed term basis. 1 post transfers over to another budget, and 2 are coming to the end because they're the end of fixed term contracts. So I'm referring you back to the Section 2 and ask that committee note the recommendations that the employment information for social work resources for November and December 2020 are noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Any questions? Hugh?
Thanks, Chair. Just in respect to the exit interviews, I'm pleased to see that there's an increase in the people who are actually participating in those. But can you maybe advise if there are any themes emerging from those exit interviews that would indicate that we have any particular difficulties in terms of why staff are choosing to leave?
There is analysis that's carried out to identify any particular themes, and they will be addressed. There's no emergent themes coming up. You'll know that there's a variety of options that people get to indicate why they're leaving from, whether they're moving to sometimes within another post within the council or moving out with the area for their own personal reasons. But while we're not seeing any emergent themes coming out, we do carry out the analysis, and we would address that if we've seen anything that was coming up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Catherine?
Thanks, Chair. I hope you'll indulge me here, but I know this is a standards report, but I thought Alan's question was relevant because we're asked by our constituents who may work for home care about their £500 payment. So this is a staffing report. So could somebody please tell us, it's quite a simple question, when are they going to get the money in their pay packet? Thanks.
The £500, as you know, the guidance has come out from Scottish Government, so there was quite a lot of debate at a national, or discussion at national level in terms of how that can be applied. The guidance has only just recently been issued to councils, and it's anticipated that payments will be made in the April pay.
Okay. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Hugh's question and looking at the analysis on page 36, we've got an increase over the year of 2 analysed as being poor relationship with manager colleagues. Now, I'm just wondering that obviously that there's a possibility that these are the people who will make a great intent to give you a response to why they're leaving, because maybe they've got a bit of umbrage with the person involved. But I would ask, do we investigate that to find out if there's a validity involved? And if there is a validity, do we then essentially appraise the people involved of what action's been taken, or for that matter, are we dealing with it in any way at all?
Yeah, we would carry out investigations if concerns were raised, even if at the point of someone when they are leaving. So we would carry out the appropriate investigations in line with the council's policies and procedures.
Okay, Jim.
Thank you.
Right, Alan.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It's just on page 35 when we're looking at the absenteeism, and the annual average in manual workers is 8.4, while council-wide it's 4.4. Now, manual workers include home care workers plus residential care workers. Are we not quite alarmed? I mean, there's a 4% difference between council-wide and that. Have we any idea about the home care and the care workers? How many of them are included in that 8.4?
I don't have the exact detail in front of me, but yeah, that again, similar to the question around exit interviews, we do look at trends that are in absence information that we've got, and we do have quite an extensive amount of information that we can look at, and we would certainly be dealing with that in terms of looking at the appropriate actions in line with the maximising attendance policy.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. No further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2? Thank you.
Agreed.
Moving on to item 6 is the Integrated Safeguarding and Early Intervention Hub, Emergency Social Work and Parenting Pathway Support, pages 39 to 44. And Liam will take us through this.
Thanks very much, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide an update to the committee about additional funding we've got from the Scottish Government to look at mental health and wellbeing support for children, young people and their carers, and we're looking to establish an integrated safeguarding hub to address some of that. We're also looking to enhance the services within the FAS project, which is our intensive under 12 project. It's also to provide the committee an update on changes to the establishment within the emergency social work services and an update into parenting support and a parenting coordinator. Section 3 of the report gives some background to the Integrated Safeguarding Hub, and you'll see within that that it identifies that the highest proportion of referrals that are received from children and families come from the police, and that relates predominantly to domestic violence, addictions, alcohol and drugs, mental health and parenting issues. These can range from either low-level interventions to very intense interventions that could lead to child protection. 3.2 identifies that there's been a piece of work done with Police Scotland and Children and Family Services, and we've agreed to collaborate on a co-located integrated safeguarding hub, and that would meet the needs of those people that are suffering from low-level mental health issues, but also that lead to interventions. 3.3 in the report identifies that we've established funding from the Scottish Government. There's £15 million that has been downloaded nationally for mental health and wellbeing to address these issues, and it's looking at an early intervention and diversion model, and we've been able to get funding from that, and it's predominant to look at mental wellbeing and mental distress within children. The development of the integrated hub and the additional support for FAS is also identified within section 3, and it's proposed that we increase that by 3 additional workers. And that's in the back of that the overwhelming number of families that are supported either have mental health and wellbeing issues or addiction issues, so it meets the criteria for that. Within section 5 of the report, it identifies the background to ESWS and out of hours service. And the section identifies that utilising an availability budget that we have, but also converting overtime costs, that we can create a 0.5 social work assistant and an additional social worker post. In section 6 of the report, it identifies the parenting support programmes that are coordinated and evidence-based. And you'll see within that there's a journey that we've referenced from 2012 onwards and through inspections, so that we can actually become more focused and coordinated in our parenting support and parent pathways. And through the Children's Services Partnership, we've identified that there's a need for a coordinator to ensure that we continue on that journey. And we've, between education, social work and health, we've established funding for a parent coordinator post for a 2-year period, just to look at a proof of concept. Section 7 of the report identifies the posts that we're looking at, and Section 8 of the report identifies the funding solutions which have all been costed. So if I can refer members back to the recommendations at Section 2, what we're looking for is the contents of the report to be noted, and that the additions to the establishment at Section 7 be approved by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Any questions? Robert?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I mean, manifestly, everybody is keen to make improvements in this general area of work, but I wonder if I could ask, because I don't think it actually comes out clearly in the report, why we are moving from a locality-based arrangement to a more centralised arrangement when, for example, at the police level, we're normally dealing with, say, Rutherglen office, we're dealing with the inspector at that level or the duty sergeant, same with the social work. It doesn't sound as if the case has been made out for a more centralised approach to this, moving away from localities, which is the way we've operated in many other respects. I wonder if I can have a bit of background to that, because I'm not at present particularly convinced this is a generally advantageous way of working. This is quite a lot of money. Additional staff coming into it is obviously fine, but it seems to be kind of like getting lost off in a bureaucratic reorganisation rather than something that provides direct additional services to the people concerned.
Yep, Councillor, I suppose what we've done is we've done a review of all our duty systems across the services. So even though we've got 4 localities, we've effectively got 5 duty systems which work differently. And by centralising and being co-located with the police, what we're hoping to do is to get a more consistent approach and response for those families that are generally not known to us within the communities. For families that are known to us and that are on orders, they'll still be dealt with at a locality. But for those that are almost like your cold calls or the families that are not known, what we're looking to do is try and get something a bit more consistent. What we've recognised, and it's between the police and between ourselves, but also we've been discussions with colleagues from health, is that sometimes it's a very inconsistent response you can get. And it can be based on resources, but it can also be based on thresholds. So sometimes a response from Lanark's different from a response from Rutherglen. So what we're looking to do is to try and make sure that that's consistent across the board. The hub will be an initial screening hub and triage hub, and then any ongoing supports will be sent to the local offices and they'll do that. But it'll be on the basis that there's been an agreed plan between police and social work. So even though it might look like, or I take your point that it might present as more bureaucracy, actually what the intention is to reduce the bureaucracy that we've got within that. We do get on average it's like 150 referrals a day from the police. So that's 150 referrals that could have 150 different responses. And what we're doing is we're hoping to make sure it's a consistent response that we have between police and social work. It is new and it's something that we're probably going to have to test out, and we've been in discussions with colleagues in health, but also colleagues in North as well, because the police would want to see this as a process that's pan-Lanarkshire. So it's almost a proof of concept which we're agreeing to undertake with the police at this stage.
It does sound, if I may say so with great respect, I don't think I'm at all reassured by that explanation. In fact, you've got stuff coming up. You're dividing it into 2 bits, so to speak. You know, the routine bits you know about, which are going to happen at a community level, and then the other ones we don't know about, which are going to go up to a higher level, then they're going to come back to the community again. It doesn't sound a particularly effective or efficient process, dare I say it.
I totally accept your view that you don't think it's efficient, but what we've, in order to sort of get some of the groundwork for this, we've consulted with the localities and with the staff in all the localities about what they think will work. We've also consulted with other stakeholders like police, education, social work. So what this will be a central point for all referrals, so it should all be dealt with consistently. And what we can do is start to scope out what the demand is and whether we need to increase that team or decrease that team. We'll do that as we go on. It will still be a very close relationship with the localities, because the new post of the fieldwork manager will work closely with the fieldwork managers in every locality about identifying what the priority groups are. We're confident between the police and social work that this is something that's worthwhile investing in and worthwhile to try and address some of the volume that we get coming through the door.
Could I ask how you'll measure success, Chair, if I might? Because in a way, I mean, obviously it's your professional judgment, as I'm not trying to challenge that in any shape or form, but at the end of the day, you know, this either works more successfully or less successfully than the current arrangements, except you've got obviously increased staff to help you do it. How will you measure success, if you like? What's the benchmarks of whether this works better or whether it doesn't?
There'll probably be a range of metrics that we'll look at, but the initial ones that success will be that when we get a referral, we deal with it as quickly as possible. So some referrals and some other duty teams could sit and wait for 6 weeks for an intervention. This will be a triage in real time. So what we look for is that a turnaround very quickly, or whether it's an intervention is needed or not, or signposted to another area. Some of the other wider successes will be because it's about early intervention and it is on the back of a lot of mental health and mental distress. What we're hoping is that young people don't escalate through the children's hearing system. And if we can divert them from the children's hearing system by getting supports within the community at an earlier stage, we would see that as a success. Mm-hmm. And expanding that, what we'd see as a success is a reduction in the number of young people that become accommodated in the long term as well.
Thanks, Liam. Hugh?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that question, Robert, because it had me questioning what I thought I was reading in the paper, because I'd read it entirely differently to yourself. I'd read it as being a triage centre where calls would come in, people would deal with those as early as they possibly could, and then it would be managed on a kind of well-being GIRFEC practice model that would then be based around potentially school cluster areas or wherever they were going to be in terms of whether it's locality hubs or, you know, wherever those calls might come in from. So I got a wee bit confused in terms of whether I'd read it right or not. So I don't know, Liam, if you could maybe explain that a wee bit clearer, just in terms of what the actual practice would be around. I'm guessing it's like the old reception services service that was there, but only, you know, probably a bit more holistic in terms of the approach that we'd take, and it would tackle it at an earliest possible opportunity. So just to kind of clarify that a wee bit for me, if you could.
Yeah, the model is going to be, what we see as the advantage, it'll be co-located with the police, so it'll be real-time discussions about thresholds with the police. The difference between this model and the reception services was to all intents and purposes a call centre that would take the information, put it onto the system and then signpost it to the local area or to another stakeholder. This model will actually have an intervention part of it. So we've got a joint investigative interview and social workers will be part of this team. Our child protection social workers will also be part of it, and we've got social work assistants that have came from localities that will be part of the team. So they'll do that initial, as well as the desktop triage, it would do that initial, do we need to go out and visit and establish what the facts are within that. The team will also work closely with our early intervention teams, and that would be the FAS service, the IFS, Intensive Family Support Service, as well, also with addiction services. So anything where we can signpost in real time to a resource, they'll get that. That will be a fast track pathway. So it's about looking about how we can speed up processes as opposed to it being a referral process. And there's a lot of transactions along the way from localities. It will link with localities. They'll do the initial screening and initial assessment, and then that will link with an assessment back to locality if it becomes a longer term piece of work.
Thanks, Liam. That's really helpful.
Okay, Hugh. Thank you. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Can I say that this piece of work is exceptional, that it's something that we've been needing to do just to essentially sort of target and focus the actions on behalf of these children. And let's remember that the children are the innocents when adults like ourselves go off the rails and have addictions that which are not only going to be damaging the adults involved, but it can also have a detrimental and traumatic impact on the children as well. So I think that this is actually some action which is actually going to be of great worth to the children. And as you're indicating there as well, that it also has an impact on the adults as well, because they may get assistance and care maybe a bit quicker than they would normally do. The one question I have is that obviously you've mentioned there about the involvement with the police, and I appreciate that the police will be to a large extent on the front line. But I'm just wondering where the education services come in. Now, I know that over the last year that's maybe been intermittent with the pandemic situation, but under normal circumstances, presumably that the education people in the schools would identify where a child is maybe withdrawn, appearing to be traumatized, having some sort of mental reaction. So they would be identifying that. Would they then also be feeding into yourselves in this process?
Councillor, the Woods and education will be part and parcel of the ongoing discussions for any referral that we get. So through the education, we've got joint assessment teams that are within the schools, and any young person that's presenting with any wellbeing issue will initially be discussed within the joint assessment team. If it's then a referral that needs an immediate response, it'll go to the local team, but it will also go to this team as well if it's a child protection. So this will be a single point of contact for education colleagues to refer things into. So it should complement what's happening within education. The colleagues in health will be the same. So any referral that they have, unless it's dealt with in a multidisciplinary discussion, this will be a single point of contact for all those discussions to take place as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Liam, and I appreciate this paper.
Right, okay. Thanks everybody for the healthy contributions there. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Moving on to item 7, peer support for justice services, pages 45 to 62, and Diane Dobby will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, councillors. The paper offers an update to the committee on a joint bid from the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and Justice Social Work Services to the Multiple and Complex Needs subgroup of the Drug Death Task Force for 2 peer support workers. The peer support workers will be expected to have lived experience of substance use. The context and ethos behind the bid is that including people with lived experience to Justice Social Work Services will be beneficial and improve outcomes for service users. The support workers themselves would be expected to engage with people who are open to Justice Social Work Services and subject to statutory orders such as community payback orders. The idea is that they would offer some additionality and engage with a person during the course of their order and then continue to offer them support afterwards to ensure, for example, that they continue to engage with health and recovery networks such as the Beacons. So the recommendation to the panel is that the committee at point 2 is asked to approve that 2 full-time peer support assistant posts are established within Justice Social Work Services for a fixed term period of 18 months, subject to the approval of funding from the Drug Death Task Force, which we're expected to hear about any day now. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Hugh?
Thanks. Just a quick question on the peer mentors, if I could. What are you expecting any issues around any, I suppose, problems around disclosure, given the previous experience of peer mentors, and has there been any thought given as to how that's going to be assessed so that they're not excluded from, you know, maybe taking up that role?
Yes. In terms of anyone who would be recruited, they would be subject to the PVG scheme, so it would be expected that they would be recruited to the same standard as others, but given opportunities, even if they do have a background, that would be considered. I guess there would be an expectation that they would be at a stage in their recovery where they've moved to a point where they're ready for employability. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's great. I just didn't want people to be excluded because maybe there was something in their background, and if they're the right person, then they should be given that opportunity. So
Okay, Hugh, I think you went on to mute there at the end. No, I think that's an excellent report and an excellent way forward, and the points that Hugh raises are valid, particularly for the lifestyle of some of the individuals who have recovered and are now willing to help with peer supports. Excellent. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 8, Analogue to Digital Telecare Project, pages 63 to 66, and Ian will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. This is a report that concerns the work to move from an analogue platform to a digital platform for our telecare, community alarms and all the other equipment that we use to keep people safe in their own homes. There's quite a considerable amount of work to be done to prepare for this switch over in terms of the telephone system, looking at new equipment, new ways of working, and new exchange systems, for example. So we've been fortunate in a bid to the Scottish Government to bring in some funding to support the project, which we're match funding with some existing resources. So we're asking the committee to consider the recommendation in section 2 that we establish some fixed term posts to support this work and moving it forward. So happy to pick up any questions that folks may have about this.
Don't see any hands. Can we agree the recommendations at 2? Thank you.
Agreed.
Item 9 is establishment changes, pages 67 to 76, and Martin will take us through this. Martin Kane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I'll try and do is I'll try and work my way through this so that it makes sense for committee, just taking it in sections. So the report's twofold. It covers some additional establishment changes resulting from COVID, and then the second part is around governance and leadership capacity that we're hoping to strengthen. So if we take the first bit around COVID demands, that relates to two particular areas, care homes and PPE and testing, etc. So you'll see in section 3 of the report, what we've outlined there is some of the additional demands that have resulted from, particularly in residential care, as a result of COVID, through the fact that we've had to obviously initiate a new model of working within residential care establishments. And you'll see the tasks outlined under 4.1 there, which give an overview of that. In terms of PPE, you'll know we've had the PPE hub in place now since probably March of last year. So that's almost a year we've had the PPE hub in place. And over that period, the PPE hub is put out in the region of about 25 million items of PPE across 200 providers for social care. So that's come at quite a lot of additional resource demand for us on top of what we were already dealing with. So a lot of that's been covered from within my team. So what the report sets out is how we would hope to resource that in the sort of medium to longer term, and that's set out in table 8.2 of the report. Just turn attention to the second part of the report, and this is around more the governance and leadership aspect that's referred to in the purpose of the report, and that's staffing changes around planning, development, substance misuse and public protection. And within that, and this, just to make it easy for committee to follow, this refers to table 8.3 of the report. So at the back of the report, table 8.3 covers this. And that refers to additional capacity that we're hoping to put into the planning and development team as a result of additional strategic planning asks of us by Scottish Government and locally, particularly around things like See Here and health and social care integration. This post in particular has been to committee before as a short-term post, but obviously we're looking to mainline that now. The other bit of this is around the Community Addiction and Recovery Service, and you'll see what we've mentioned in the report there is this is to tackle additional demand around on that service in the Hamilton area, and it's recommended a 0.5 full-time equivalent social worker post be added to establishment. 5.4 of the report is an operations manager for adult protection. This is a bit about strengthening the governance around adult support and protection, and in particular the whole quality assurance role. Other partnerships have a post similar to this in place that's worked well, and we'd be hoping to replicate that practice in South Lanarkshire. The latter part of the report relates to an IJB direction, section 6, and this is to do with the Community Living Fund, and I'll come back to what that fund's about, but essentially what this is to do with is we procure, and you'll see from just the information in the report, we procure anywhere between 90 and 100 million pounds of social care services in any given year, and that's around things like home care, care homes, supported living placements, etc. And what we're hoping to do is use that Community Living Fund just to strengthen governance arrangements and quality assurance around how that fund's best used. A lot of the work we're currently doing and into the future requires us to look at very specialist placements for adults with learning disabilities, etc. And being able to do the work around looking at what we currently spend money on, are we getting value for money? Where do we need to disinvest and reinvest money? This is a lot of what this team will do, and that's obviously set out in the table in 8.4. So that sets that out, and also it connects with the whole commissioning model that we're trying to take forward in terms of commissioning for outcomes. So that's set out in 8.4. The very final part of the report is around occupational therapy and equipment and adaptations, and that's again to strengthen the governance around that, because what we're moving to obviously is a more integrated model of occupational therapy across health and social care. So again, that's set out in 8.5. So I'll take committee back just to the recommendations in the report in section 2 of the report, which is the The content of the report is noted, that additional posts are added to establishment as outlined in section 8, and that the funding to meet new service demands to deliver services because of COVID-19 and realignment of existing resources be noted. And on that basis, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Martin. Don't see any hands. So you got off lightly there, Martin. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agree.
Moving on to item 10, the rates for social care services, pages 77 to 78, and it's Ian Beattie who will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. So this report concerns the rates we pay to some of the contracted providers that Martin just discussed, the National Care Home kind of contracts, and the rates we pay for care at home and supported living and so forth. So generally we come to committee every year to agree an uplift to those rates, and this year we're asking for a variation in the model. What we're finding is that the negotiations around the National Care Home contract and the living wage uplifts are taking a bit of time, and in the context of the COVID response and the financial challenges that many providers are facing, we're keen that when these uplifts are sorted out at the national level, then kind of washed back through to the council, that we're able to agree the uplift position with providers at the earliest possible opportunity. So what we're asking the committee's permission today is for the delegation of authority to the Director of Health and Social Care and the Director of Finance to finalise the rates we'll pay in the new financial year, obviously based on the funds available to the council and in line with the kind of the advice from COSLA and so forth. So happy to pick up any questions on this.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Agree the recommendations at 2.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Moving on to items for noting. Item 11 is Adult and Older People Day Service Review Project, pages 79 to 142. And Ian will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. I don't propose to kind of dwell in the detail of the paper, because I think the most of the elected members had the opportunity to attend a seminar and just discuss the paper in more detail. So I'll just kind of pick up the highlights. This is obviously a very substantial piece of work that involved extensive consultation over a number of months, and we're now bringing back the kind of findings and the proposals for the next stages. I suppose I would draw committee's attention to section 4 of the reports, where we discuss some of the findings of the review. We note the kind of the relatively low occupancy levels across a number of the day centres, but also kind of links to that in terms to the increasing levels of dependency, complexity we're dealing with in some of these centres, and how that impacts in terms of the number of people we can look after in a particular day. There's also discussion in the report about the 22% of the budget being spent on kind of transport arrangements, and there's some concerns about potential kind of double funding from the public purse around that, where folks have got kind of benefits and access to mobility vehicles and so forth. One of the key points we're drawing out is traditionally folks have been assessed for a service rather than assessing them for in terms of their outcomes, in terms of the principles of the Self-Directed Support Act. So what we're really looking to do is move the thinking a little bit towards being SDS first. So what are the outcomes the person's got to meet? What kind of assets can they draw on? What's the support plan that we need to put in place to help them? And if there's needs for carer support, or needs for social activity, meaningful activity, have a look at a range of ways in which those needs can be met. We've also looked at some of the existing tests to change, the successful model we've got in Stonehouse Lifestyles, where we have brought together adults with learning disabilities and older people in the same building, and some kind of sharing of resource and the benefits that's accrued. And we've also touched on the outreach service we've been operating for the past year as a kind of substitute for the building-based care, and seeing some of the benefits that's also brought to bear. So moving through into sections 4.8.4 and 8.5, we then talk about some of the principles of redesign. I think what we're really pushing for is a more blended model of approach, so SDS driven, but trying to have a look at how we might use both buildings and outreach services to find a more a broader, richer range of options for people, also taking account of the pressures around self-direct support, people seeking things like direct payments, which obviously pool resource from existing services, and I think as a lot that Scotland reports have indicated, perhaps a need to kind of disinvest from some existing services to free up resource to invest in new ways of working. So in 4.8.5 we can set out some of the key themes we'd like to kind of take forward. So what we're really proposing as next stages is we take those ideas, those themes out for wider kind of consultation with the key stakeholders, primarily service users and carers, staff members as well, and pull that together into an implementation plan for taking these ideas forward to the next stage. So hopefully that gives an overview of the paper, and obviously we can pick up the questions. Michelle Lynn, who led the review, is also on the call this morning, and will be able to pick up any kind of details you may have about how the review was conducted and so forth.
Thanks very much, Ian. Hugh, you're first.
Thanks, Chair. Ian, can I say a huge amount of work is going into this, and I think the team need to be credited for that. But in all honesty, I found this a really hard read, and I had to go over it about 4 or 5 times to try and get a kind of understanding of it, and it's left me with a number of questions. Chair, I don't know if you want me just to go through the questions on block, and then, or do you want them one at a time? We'll do them on block.
I'm happy just to get you to read them out. I'll try and jot them down and give you a response. Yeah.
Ian, in terms of 4.8.2, when it says a redesigned day service, I'm not really clear about what that means in reality when you say that it will be well positioned to meet the partnership's objectives. I know you mentioned the blended model of support, but is there any more detail that you can give at this point in terms of how that will actually be implemented across the authority and across the different areas? In terms of 4.8.3, you're talking about closing fixed assets such as buildings. Have any buildings been identified to date in terms of which ones are no longer fit for purpose? And in those particular areas, do we have capacity from the third sector and private sector organisations to meet the gap that's there in terms of the supports that might be needed by individuals who actually use those services? And what if they want to continue to use a day service provision? Will there be something available in their area? In terms of 4.8.5, it says the current model is based on services and not outcomes. I'm a wee bit worried about that, because I would have assumed that although it was a service-based model, it was actually meeting outcomes for people and continues to meet outcomes for a number of people. So I'm a wee bit concerned about just how that's been written. Also, in terms of 4.8.6, it says maintaining an element of access to building-based services in each locality. I'm not sure what that means in practice in terms of what an element of access means. And would there be a sort of core service group that you would be looking to target in terms of access to those services? And my last point, sorry for this, folks, is 6.2. Given the lack of availability of building-based services, any assessment in terms of the impact on people who would normally have been using those services over the past year, and what support services have been put in place to try and, I suppose, mitigate, some of the issues that those people might have encountered over that period? That's me, Chair. Thanks very much for indulging me.
Okay, Ian, you want to come back on that?
Okay, I'll try and cover those. And in my head, I think a number of those questions are kind of interrelated, so I'll try and explain that and try and hopefully pick up themes as I go along. So in terms of the redesign of the day service, I suppose what the conclusion of the review group was that we probably have too much invested in too many building-based services. So looking to the Stonehouse model, I suppose the hypothesis we'd like to kind of test a bit further is that we could operate a mix of building-based and outreach services from fewer buildings. So if you took the Stonehouse model, you could bring into the interlicensed buildings both older people and adults with learning disabilities, and you could possibly free up some of the staffing resource to continue some of the outreach service. So away picking up your last question of what we've been doing over the past year, we've been offering quite a considerable level of I suppose one-to-one support, trying to meet people's outcomes, particularly support carers as best we can given the prevailing conditions. Some of the research we did into that, people I think found elements of that very helpful, or though equally some people were missing the building-based service. So within the resource that we have available to us, I'm currently in an either-or position. I can either do building-based services or I can do outreach. I can't do both because it's the same staff member doing both of those. So part of the proposition is that if could we free up some of our staff to be able to kind of reach out and do a bit more kind of tailored responses, as well as some of the building-based model. I think carers have had an eye to other local authority areas where they've basically done away with daycare services altogether. That's not what we're proposing here at all. I think what we're looking at is a potential move to having fewer buildings. So I think it's kind of 19 centres we've got at the moment. So bringing that total down a little bit, but making sure that each locality has got access to some building-based services as well as the outreach there. In terms of the some of the fixed assets, we've identified that a couple of our existing older people's day centres have got physical limitations in terms of dependency needs. Those are Saltire and East Kilbride and Jimmy Swinburne and Blantyre. These buildings are not physically of the same standard as most of our establishments. So things like putting in kind of track hoists and providing optimal facilities for service users is pretty much impossible. We're led to believe. We feel that we could bring those staff members, the service users, into other underutilised buildings within the locality. Newbury Rooney, for example, is an excellent building, but is seriously underutilised in the Hamilton locality. There's capacity in Murray Owen up in East Kilbride, for example, to be able to bring people into one building as opposed to more than one. So we are fairly confident that we could manage some amalgamation of services in terms of the model that we're describing. I think we've talked about people being assessed for services and not outcomes. I mean, clearly, we're trying to make these services personalised as we can do to meet people's outcomes. I mean, a clear outcome of any daycare is often providing carers with a break, with some respite, also providing the service user with meaningful activity. But I think we've got a fairly one-dimensional offer here. You know, in terms of STS, people should have access to range and choice. So if someone's looking for day supports, the day support option tends to be a day service. The alternative perhaps being a direct payment. But to release direct payments, we need to find that will release that resource from existing ways of working, existing assets. We don't have a new pot of money called direct payments. That money comes out of the overall budget that we have, so we need to find a way of releasing some of that cash, as it were, to allow people to make their own personal choices in accordance with their support plan and access the supports that they require. I think I've tried to pick up all five of your questions in there. Hopefully I've covered that in terms of that explanation of the thinking.
Just a quick comeback, if I may, in terms of the service provision. I really need just, I suppose, some reassurance that if we have people in the communities who are choosing to have a buildings-based service, that will be available to them in terms of their choice of using their SDS package of support. Because I get a sense that it's almost going between, we can either provide SDS or we can provide building-based services, when we should be having that blended model of providing both. And I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance that that model will be there. And can you maybe identify the buildings that we feel are fit for purpose?
Yeah, so what we would say is that that's what you're describing there is very much what we want to have in place. So for folks who want a direct payment, there's funds available for them to access that. So in each locality, we maintain some building-based provision, so people can attend a place, and then to have some flexible resource where we can support people individually or in small groups, and that may include taking them to a place in the community where they would find some benefit, where they might find their meaningful activities. It's just to give us that breadth and flexibility. Maybe in each locality will have lifestyles buildings which already provide good quality physical environments around adults with learning disabilities. And I see the Stonehouse one in the also offers older people's care. So what we really want to test out is whether it's sensible to develop that kind of thinking around the lifestyles and buildings such as Newbury Rooney, and reduce the number of provisions we have in each locality. So have a more one or two buildings rather than having several. I think the report itself actually identifies an uneven distribution of the resource. So in some ways there's more resource, I think, in Clydesdale, relatively speaking, than we have up in East Kilbride, given the number of service users. So we do want to make sure we've got that kind of resource distributed evenly according to the level of need within each locality.
Thanks, Ian. That gives me a bit of reassurance. Thanks, John, for indulging me.
Thanks, you. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Hughes took a bit of my thunder there, but a couple of points in what Ian had raised. He mentioned about other authorities doing away with their daycare services. I've experienced that, by the way, and what we get is the situation what we've got in this council, where we have people going out, workers going out visiting some old buddy for an hour, play dominoes, play cards, right? The old person who's used to go into day centre twice a week for 4 hours, their carer then doesn't get that free time they had before. I've also heard the constituent who were told that they would need to pay for the visit of the individual. If they didn't pay, if the day centre reopened, their relation would lose the place there, which I did ask Liam yesterday to have a look into that. But I'm just going to ask a question here. On page 80, 37, around 667 people attend daycare. And then we go to page 131, and in my 20 years work with elderly people, Mr. K is 80-year-old, been attending day for 2010. His dementia's improved that much with his day visit, and he's doing all this and that. Great for him. I'd like to see how that would work. But in that case, the worker, 15 hours a week he gets. So that worker in a working week of 37 hours could only do 2.5 people, right, to provide that service. If we get 667 people attending daycare, we would need 280 care workers. How many care workers do we have in the care centres? Daycare centres.
I think Michelle can give you the details of the number of care workers, but I think there's a slightly bigger question there, Councillor Faulkner. So if I refer back to my comments around self-directed support, so what we really want to do is make sure we're understanding the person's circumstances as well as we can, and the circumstances of their carer, and put in place an individualised support plan based on a personal budget that the services in their carer can target towards the services of their choice. So that may include some of the one-to-one type support that's talked about in that particular kind of case example. It may also involve sessions within the day centre. So clearly an hour of one-to-one support will be more expensive than an hour of group support. But really the principles of SDS is there's some choice in there for folks about how they want to best use their funds. So some people can and do choose to kind of have more focused activity with a budget. Others choose to go for the more kind of larger group activities that the day centre provides. So I think that those are just examples in the report to try and give the reader a bit of a flavour of the range of options that we can come up with, and some of the benefits of some of the tailored approaches going forward. But if you want detail about numbers of staff and so forth, I'll let Michelle kind of answer that.
Chair, could I just come back to Ian on that point there?
Okay, Alan.
And he mentions on that, SDS is obviously, the threshold for SDS is concerning the most vulnerable people in our community. And the point of younger adults, I see with older adults who are frailty and mobility is poorer. SDS, as I say, there's a threshold there, and it's the vulnerable people. And I've got to say that this one-to-one visiting, we've got it now, we're charging for it now, and it's not the way forward. Elderly people like to mix. I mean, we look at the elderly people in the homes now who have been isolated from their family. Elderly people look forward to going to their day centre a couple of days a week, mixing with other people, socialising and that. Could I also just bring out a wee point of information? Last week I attended the Hamilton Health and Social Care Forum, chaired by Margaret McCreef, who's also a member of the IGIB, attended by Community Links, the LAMH, Supporting Our Community, LEAP, Health, SAMH, Richmond Fellowship. And I brought up this talk, but I think none of them seem to be aware that this day centre review, and these people are covering a wide range of service users. I also did bring up the other thing, but I know it's known that this paper is the electronic contact note for visiting people, but I'll leave that to another day. So just to see how well are we consulting? I mean, I've got to say, this Mr. K, whoever he is, 80-year-old, he's been in a day centre for 10 years, so he's 70. Dementia's progressed. MD I've worked in the last 20 years, dementia's doesn't progress. It progresses worse and no better. And good luck to him if he's done that. Just my view. I've got to say, I agree with Hugh. Hugh's view is that people who want to have the day service should have that available. People who want the day SDS should. The other point in transport, I've got to say this report was excellent. I've seen it twice. It was excellently done. I might disagree with it. But in transport, we're talking about £80 a week for transporting an old buddy to their day centre. Right? A week past Monday, I'm going to my work in Bells Hall, go for Hill House to Blantyre, and there's the garage, and at 9:20, buses after bus coming from East Kilbride, coming from Hamilton, coming from Blantyre, doing schools. We've got a bus centre there. Buses lie empty at night when voluntary groups are pioneering the odds. Alan, we should be utilising.
Alan, I think that you're starting to go off piece now. So
surely you're not going to.
You're starting to go. You're going off piece, Alan.
I thought surely you're not going to mute me like that was done at the IGIB and nobody claimed responsibility.
Nobody muted you at the IGIB. You muted yourself.
Oh no. Funny, there was no recording in that meeting when I went to ask.
Right,
okay. I'll leave it at that if Ian can.
Thanks very much. Look, this is quite a significant piece of work, and there's been a members' awareness session on it, and there's plenty of opportunities to question or submit questions on it. I'm not going to, but the item is for noting. I'm not taking any further questions on it. You can raise your issues. There's plenty of opportunity to raise the issues. We're moving on.
John, I can't accept that. This is too serious a piece of work. And I think elected members are entitled to follow up. I raised questions, John, I raised questions at elected member seminar. I've raised questions privately with officers, and I would like to comment in this paper.
I'm only taking 2 more questions then, okay? 2 more on this issue, because there's been a members' awareness session. There'll be further opportunities. The paper is for noting. 2 more questions, and 2 questions, and that's yourself and Robert and Margaret Walker's third, right? Okay.
Can I continue then? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got concerns about this paper, and I know it. I agree with Alan and Hugh. I've made valid points, and I think when I look at the recommendations that we've been asked to note it, but also at the same time it's a direction of travel that we want to go down, and also that there'll be further consultation with stakeholders. I think one of my issues in the past has been concerns raised by constituents about a lack of consultation, and I'm listening to Alan saying that again stakeholders don't seem to be aware of it. And my concern is if we adopt this paper today, is it one of these papers that we adopt, we then see the problems further down the line and we're told, oh, but you accepted the paper back in March 2021. Now, I'm not prepared to do that. I think there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. I think there needs to be further consultation with user groups, and I don't think it's the right time to actually be implementing, going down the road of implementing some of this when we've been a year out of COVID, when people haven't been attending day centres are participating in some of these activities. So from my point of view, I think there's still time to take this back, hone it a bit further, satisfy me and maybe probably other councillors that there has been meaningful consultation and we're getting buy-in by the users that require this service. There's a lot of talk about self-directed support, and the way I see it is that this is a deflection to get people to use their self-directed support for this type of care and moving to one-to-one support rather than group activities, and people then start missing out on the social aspect of things. So as it stands, I'll certainly not be putting my name to this paper today, and it's up to others to do so. And I know it's for noting, but I'm not even prepared to note it other than to say that there should be further consultation and further report brought back to this committee. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor, if I can respond in terms of the
listen, I'm actually at a meeting online just now.
Alan, can you mute yourself, please?
Okay.
Right. Alan Faulkner, can you please mute yourself? Tracy, if you possible. That's it. Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Chair. So, in terms of consultation, I noted Councillor Faulkner's comments, but this day service review has been, signed off by both the IGB and this committee. We've reported general updates to both forums on a regular basis over the past year or so. So I'm surprised that folks feel they've not been cited on the fact that we're undertaking a review. In the actual body report itself, I think Michelle has highlighted that she undertook well over 100 consultation events, meeting with carers, meeting with service users, meeting with staff, meeting with referrers to discuss these services, based on a strength-based approach, kind of celebrating what's good about the service and thinking about what we can do even better. So that was the kind of methodology that we undertook. And going forward, we're not asking the IGB or indeed this committee to sign off a finalised set of circumstances. We're putting forward a hypothesis, a direction of travel that has come forward from that process of consultation, analysis, literature review, to steer ourselves towards a service that's fit for the future. We now want to go out and discuss this further with stakeholders in terms of, are there any other unintended consequences we've overlooked? Are there ways we can work with them to make this work to optimum effect? That's our intention going forward. And I suppose I would kind of highlight that things like SDS are a statutory duty upon us. We must offer people the 4 SDS options, and I'm concerned that we've not always done that within daycare. There's nothing in the legislation that says we have to run a day centre. We have to deliver on the 4 SDS options, ensure people have access to their personal budget, and then support them with their support planning and accessing services that they require. And that's very much the role of the IGB in terms of a strategic commissioning plan, to make sure that we've aggregated the needs of the population and we're putting in place the right services in the right place in a properly scaled way that meets those needs. So I think the review is pointing us in the direction of having to stand back from that a little bit and make sure the full range of options I described earlier about having access to personal budgets, having some access to some building-based supports, and having access to some more flexible kinds of care arrangements are available to the community. So that's really the premise. We want to go and consult on a bit further before we take major steps forwards in terms of the change programme. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of reassurance in terms of what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Ian. Robert.
I think, to be fair, Margaret Walker's ahead of me.
Margaret.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. In terms of the audit report in 2004 that basically said we weren't using self-directed support to its full potential, obviously there's a reason for that, and it's financial. Obviously there's a limit in terms of the number of enhanced packages, the kind to which they're referring to, that we're able to give. So I think that's what is causing some of the difficulties here, is that the financial envelope's not clear. I mean, you have obviously said the sources of alternative funding that's going to be looked at in terms of building assets, etc. And I think your previous paper, the changes to the establishment, addresses that to some extent, because it's obviously staff are going to be looking at that financial envelope and how we actually fund this, because you're not talking about funding SDS along the lines we're doing it just now, because clearly the audit report has said that that's insufficient in terms of, you know, quality of life issues and using it to its full potential. So I think we need to see that's demonstrated that we're actually able to do that, and I don't think we've got the information sufficiently around the finances to be able to get comfort from that just now. I mean, there's a reason at the moment that we are really, in terms of SDS, looking at basic packages. It's financial, and those needs and demand and the complexity of the care packages and the quality of life, to maintain a quality of life, is more expensive than actually some group settings within day centres. It's not a cheap option. And my personal concern is that I don't have the comfort just now that we are going to be able to provide that enhanced level of care and deliver those outcomes that you're talking about, which I think is brilliant. I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think the hybrid model is good. But from my personal point of view, I really need to be convinced that we can afford it. And as I say, your previous paper addressed that to some extent. I agree with a lot of the previous comments Councillor MacDonald made. We need the information fleshed out, the role of the third sector, all the rest of it, the shape of the alternative provision, more detail, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely agree with all of that. But it's not, you know, opposition to this for the sake of it. I'm not convinced in the environment that we're in that we're actually going to be able to afford the level of care packages that that Ian's talking about, which I agree, you know, would be absolutely brilliant. But for me, I need to see the financial matrix around that. And are we giving enhanced self-directed support rather than just the basic care packages, which I think is what you would be talking about here, to maintain quality of life. And also, very importantly, that carers still get the respite, because that's what they've been so badly missing through all this COVID stuff. Essential needs have been met, but that's not the same thing. And I would personally need assurances about quality of life for carers as well. Thank you.
Okay, so some general kind of comment on those reflections. I mean, in essence, we can only deliver services within the financial resource that's available to us, and what we're trying to do is make sure we maximise the impact of that resource for the individual service users. So the whole principle of the SDS is to make sure we have an accurate assessment both of the supported person and their carer, and we're able to then target resource based on the level of need and outcomes to be met. So by doing SDS properly, we're making sure that those with the most kind of complex needs get the largest share of the available financial resource to meet their outcomes. So that's kind of clearly what we're driving towards. I mean, in terms of the proposals to reduce some of the estate, clearly it costs us money to operate buildings, just maintaining them. The infrastructure costs, we've identified we've spent over £2 million a year on transport arrangements. And I suppose what we want to kind of explore in a bit more detail now is whether some of that cash can be released to be available for direct care, to be available for direct payments, that type of approach. So are we using the £11 million or so that's allocated to daycare optimally in terms of meeting people's outcomes? So I think we'll have a few questions from the review that maybe that's not the case, and by looking at an alternative model of delivery, we might be able to release a wee bit more capacity from the system to meet those care needs, particularly with the demographic demands, as we all know, that are coming forward, where we are seeing more and more people requiring care, more and more complexity. So we do need to kind of flex and modernise our services to be able to respond as best we can to that demand within the resource we have got available to us.
Thanks, Ian. Robert?
Okay, thanks, Ian.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I mean, this is a very, very important report, and it's one that I pressed for myself at the beginning against the background of the under-occupancy of the day centre arrangements. So I think we've all got this balance, if you like, between the importance of the community-based stuff and getting people together, if you like, the socialisation elements, and to be quite frank, the financial economies that can come with that. as against the more individualised care as well, and just what the balance on all of this is. It's an important debate. I appreciate it's just for noting, and you will, in a way, the next report will be perhaps the more important one in a way. But I hope you will allow other people to sort of have their input on this one, because it's an important stage of the matter as well. I think I'm persuaded by the fact that there are opportunities with regard both to the transport cost and the buildings issue to free up resources to do the whole thing in an improved fashion. But like others, I've got concerns that we lose out on the day centre, the respite, the carer end of the thing as well, if we don't get this entirely right. And what we don't want, I think, is unintended consequences, people left sort of unsupported by services in the way that they've perhaps become accustomed to in that kind of way. Couple of points, if I may. Some of the examples were given. I mean, like Alan, I wasn't all that persuaded by the examples, to be quite frank, because Mr. K and Miss D both raised the issue of whether the services that were coming in, not least the carers that came in on a daily basis to people, shouldn't have been able to pick up some of the issues that were involved there. And I do wonder if there's another issue comes out of that, whether we're as sharp as we need to be on picking up the need for additional resource, additional issues with people that are not perhaps sustaining things in their own home satisfactorily. So leaving aside the report, I do think there's that other element that exists behind it. Now, the financial thing is important. I think the balance, I think what we need to have in the next report is some clarity, as Margaret Walker, I think in a very excellent contribution said, about what the financial implications of all this are. What exactly can we do with the resource we free up from maybe the transport? And I've got a bit of reservation about how much we can free up there, and also the buildings. What can we do with that, and how is it going to meet the actual arrangement we've got? Also, I'm not sure if we've entirely identified the reasons for the under-occupancy in day centres, because there were some suggestions, I think, when we've had discussion about this before, that some of that related to times of opening and changes that are taking place in regard to all of that, and the unintended consequences of the ID, what's it called, the independent living arrangements as well. So these are the observations I would make, if I may, Chair. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Robert. Obviously, this is an ongoing piece of work, Robert, and there's been significant contributions and valid comments throughout. I know David said he's reluctant to put his name to noting the report, but we're just noting the progress, David. We're not. It's not an instruction or anything like that. So you're not endorsing the direction of travel, but the recommendations to continue with the work. So I would propose that we accept the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
We'll move on to item 2.
Chair,
yes,
sorry.
Yes,
I'm just seeking clarification on that, because it's always the usual, the devil's in the detail. And what I don't want is a situation where a constituent raises an issue with us, and I go to social work and told, well, you endorsed that in such and such a report.
No, well, David, I think anything will come back to social work for any approval of any change. There'll be no change without it coming back to social work in the form of a paper, right?
Okay, Chair, I'll take your word on that, and if it's not true,
for decision, right? For decision, David. Okay.
Chair, also on a point of order, if I may. I mean, there were only 2 people left to make contributions. That was Lynn Nayland and Margaret Cowie, both of whom I think have got valid things to say. I think it might be reasonable to allow the last 2 comments to be made, if I may suggest so.
Fair enough, Dave, Robert. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's more of a logistical issue. I appreciate that there's a lot of work gone into this report. I appreciate that we do need to overhaul daycare, but we're talking about closing buildings and also probably withdrawing transport. Now, not all service users receive mobility allowance. For people, particularly in the rural areas, they're going to have to travel a lot further. And will the SDS monies that they're allocated actually cover what will be quite a significant cost for transport?
Ian?
the wrong thing on my mic there. The principle of SDS would be to allocate a personal budget based on the assessment of need of both the service users, the supported person, and their carer. So it's very much a bespoke budget, and it's about then discussing with the service user how they might want to use those funds. So essentially, the transport component of daycare consumes a fairly chunky bit of their budget. So I suppose what we're trying to describe is that kind of conversation taking place with the service user. So if you go to daycare, this is how much of your budget will be consumed by that, the transport costs, the day centre costs. Your options may be to think about a PA, another care company, or an outreach service. So I think good practice would suggest a good conversation with the service user and the carer about how best to make use of that funding source, also taking account of other personal assets. So as you say, some people will have some disability benefits, other people won't. Some people may have family members who might support them in being able to access a building-based service, others don't. So I think it's having a more kind of tailored approach is what SDS kind of drives us towards. I mean, our day centres are defined by the current transport arrangements about what time the bus can arrive, what time the bus can go away again. It's interfaced with the school runs as well, in terms of the same bus being used for the two resources. So that's not really a person-centred bespoke service that we have at the moment. So what we really want to explore, particularly with our transport kind of colleagues, is what are the options, what are the alternatives here, have further consideration to how people might use their own personal assets as well as what the council can contribute. But I think we're really kind of pushing towards a much more SDS focused service user carer driven support plan, in which daycare will have a part to play, but it's not the only option that they'll have at their fingertips. So we can actually offer them a direct payment, because I would be concerned that we reach a stage where someone asks for a direct payment and have to go on a waiting list because there's no money available, there's no cash available to give to them because it's all bound up in the building-based fixed assets. So we need to have a bit of liquidity in our budget to be able to allow people to access direct payments and have choice in terms of their care provision.
Thanks, Ian. Margaret? Kelly?
Thanks, John, and I appreciate this is just for noting. Just a couple of things. I attended both the adult daycare review and the older people daycare review, one to do with my niece and one to do with my mum. Now, we had one consultation. We were promised more. That has never happened. So we've had basically an hour's consultation on our thoughts about daycare services. So I'm just wondering, are we going to be getting more consultation events? We've never had any letters, we've never been consulted since then. And I think to get to a decision when there hasn't been proper consultation done with the service users and their families, you know, that's not right. We should be consulted more. So I agree, well, what a lot of people are saying, the consultation hasn't been ideal, and I think there needs to be a lot more of it done. Also in the transport, I know with myself, my mum's 94, she can't get in and out of a car or a taxi anymore, but the bus is ideal. She just walks on, sits down, walks off. She couldn't attend daycare if we had to get her in and out of a car. We can't even get her to a doctor's or anything anymore. So I would like just to highlight that the buses are the best form of transport for a lot of service users due to their mobility and their disabilities. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks, Margaret.
Okay, I suppose my response would be that there was consultation. So I think you're helpfully identifying that there was some consultation events, and I think Michelle and the team repeated your experience across all of the day centres and with a slightly bigger audience. And what we're now proposing is we go back and do that circuit again with our findings, with our thinking about this, and just test out. So obviously that reflection then in terms of transport is helpful. So I don't think we'd dispute that for some service users the mode of transport is the means of accessing that. I suppose the question is, do we need to have quite as many vehicles, spend quite as much of the budget on transport, other alternatives in here that we could access to release some of that resource for other forms of care? So it's a chance to explore those issues in a bit more detail with the key stakeholders, and then we'll come back with a bit more of a finished, polished, position in terms of where we think we're going to take this review in terms of implementable actions.
John, can I just come back in? Sorry, John.
Sorry.
Could we get clarification then that you are going to come back to the service users and their families, or are you just going to go on the word of the one's consultation that we all did have? Thanks.
No, but I mean, what we're stating in this report is we have listed the areas we want to kind of test out further, and they'll be tested out through a process of consultation. So clearly over the past year, we've had the challenges of COVID and engaging with people, but I mean, hopefully as we move into the summer months, we're in a better place in terms of being able to facilitate a range of different consultation opportunities. So but we really want to kind of go forward with people, not in conflict with people. So the best way to do that is to actually talk to them about our thinking, finesse the thinking, and then come forward with a realistic set of options that people understand.
Thanks,
Ian. Thanks, John.
Right. Alcohol and Drug Partnerships Local Strategy for 20 to 23, and it's Liam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a report that's just for noting for the committee, and it's about as you said, it's the South Lanarkshire Alcohol and Drugs Partnership Strategy, and it's usually referred to as the ADP strategy. The section 3 in the report just gives some background to what ADPs are, and you'll see within the report that it identifies that South Lanarkshire formed an ADP in September 2017. That was following disaggregation of a pan-Lanarkshire event. In November 2019, prior to the pandemic, the Scottish Government asked all ADPs to produce a local strategy for 2020 to 2023. We undertook consultation events from November to February across 1920, and that informed our strategy. But what we recognise is the pandemic actually got in the way of doing a full consultation and getting a full stakeholder engagement events that took place, but we were asked still to submit a strategy. So that strategy was submitted, and it's attached in you'll see the link at the back of the papers for those that want access to it. The strategy is based on the framework of the rights, respect and recovery, and it's also evaluating Scotland's alcohol strategy as well. And again, the links are in the back of the document there. Section 4 in the report talks about the strategic direction of the local ADP within that, and we're following the 5 priorities identified within the rights, respect and recovery framework, and you'll see that our actions are identified against that within the plan. 4.3 identifies that the strategy, one of the conditions is that it needs to complement other strategies. So what we've referenced is housing, education, public health and justice strategies, and this does complement that, and we looked at all those other strategies as well so that we could see what the engagement processes were. 4.5 in the report identifies that just reinforces this was written prior to COVID, so what we've gone back to the Scottish Government and other ADPs is to say that really what we need to do is now do a strategy that reflects what COVID and recovery will look like, and we're waiting on guidance back that will be undertaken. If it's not a national guidance, we'll do it locally because it's a bit disingenuous if we're talking about improvement actions. We're not actually making any reference to COVID. We've commissioned an organisation called Figure 8 to do consultation, and that consultation is currently taking place between March and April with as wide a range of stakeholders as we can get, and with service users, and it's being done remotely for people. And what that will do is inform us for 21 to 23 in terms of our commissioning plan. So the strategy is there for noting for the committee, and the links are attached at the end of the report for reference. And happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. I don't see any hands up, Liam, so you got off lightly. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 13 is the Transformation and Service Improvement Programme, pages 147 to 154, and Ian's going to take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the kind of regular update we provide to this committee in terms of a range of projects designed to change and improve the service. So I'll just kind of briefly go over them and pick up questions at the end. So starting with the care and support service review, to remind committee members that this is a supported living service the council operates for adults with learning disabilities. That review is pretty much concluded now, and we're just finalising the report. So we hope that the next committee cycle will be taking this one back here for further discussion in terms of our thinking about how we sustain and modernise this service. The next section, 4.2, covers the care facilities programme, which is primarily focused at the moment on the Blantyre development, which is now on site. I've seen some lovely pictures of trenches and foundations being set. So we're meeting regularly with the project team to keep an eye on that. So it would look that some of the initial properties will be available to us towards the end of this year for the sort of tech-enabled barrier-free housing. So that was good news, and the teams will now begin the work to identify the first tenants, and we'll be starting to do some of the work around recruiting of staff over the next number of months to support that facility going forward. In terms of the rest of the programme, that's we in a bit of a holding position at the moment. Obviously, the staff who are involved in managing this programme are also the staff who are involved in the COVID response, so around our own care homes and the PPE hub and so forth. So our capacity is slightly limited, but also noting the fact that the COVID position around residential nursing care has been pretty dramatic. We've got many hundreds of vacancies across the sector, and we need to be thinking about how the sector operates going forward as we recover from COVID. So I think it's important we pause and take stock of the wider operating environment before we progress with any other programmes. The next section talks about a range of activity around mental health. Obviously, recovery around the mental health service is quite important, and we're really quite concerned about the impact of lockdown on people's mental health and well-being. So obviously some of the elements around the Action 15 programme about building better and stronger infrastructure into the primary care around GP practice to give people kind of access point for wider advice around issues that may support their mental health and well-being. So that's being rolled out. It's already established quite successfully in a number of practices, but that will kind of roll out further across Lanarkshire over the next number of months. And similarly, the Action 15 targeting around the prisoner healthcare, police custody and so forth, that work's ongoing too. We've made a bit more progress around the integration of community mental health teams in South Lanarkshire. Committee will remember that the NHS mental health services are currently hosted by the North Partnership, and the nursing and then psychological therapy services are being delegated down to the South HSCP. So we've got our kind of management team in place now to support that transition, and that's kind of moving ahead. And we're undertaking some work around capitalising an opportunity to bring the council and the NHS practitioners together to maximise the impact of their support. We've also talked a little here about unscheduled care and some of the thinking to try and move senior decision makers closer to the front door, as it were. So that seems to have an impact in terms of making sure folks get the right support at the right time and limits the likelihood of things escalating if get those senior decision makers to work with them at early points. And then finally talking a little bit about the new forensic facilities and the naming conventions around those. Care at Home is in section 4.5. Care at Homes continue to be at the forefront of the COVID response, supporting our workforce to do a very important job of sustaining services in an often risky operating environment. So we've talked a bit about the work around vaccination programmes, which have been really successful. We had a very high uptake of staff taking up the COVID vaccines. We're now rolling out a testing regime around Care at Home, and that's moving in the right direction as well, with a pretty high uptake there too. Some of the interim arrangements we've put in place around community meals, working with providers to build resilience in the service when we've had large numbers of staff off with COVID-related illnesses, which we touched on in one of the first reports we dealt with today. Another thing we need to highlight in terms of care at home is we've now begun the rollout of the new electronic scheduling system that commenced in the Hamilton locality and Uddingston and Bothwell areas a couple of weeks ago. So that seems to be going pretty well, picking up any wee glitches with the system and ironing those out. So we hope to start rolling out further across Hamilton in the coming weeks and then across the rest of the South Lanarkshire. And the day service review we've touched on. And the last section here is really about equipment and adaptations. Talks a little about the work we're doing around the two equipment stores, one run by the North Partnership, another one run by Glasgow EquipU, and just trying again to maximise the economy and the impact of these facilities to support the OTs to get equipment out to service users and patients as quickly as we can do and the most cost effective way. So that's also linked to a previous report on building in some staffing capacity to support this kind of work. So that's a quick canter through all our improvement activities. So happy to pick up any questions.
Thanks very much, Ian. Alan? You're on mute, Alan.
Sorry, Chair, we're on item 14.
No, 13.
Oh, 13, sorry.
Okay.
Right, sorry.
Okay. Can we agree the recommendations at 2 then?
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to item 14, and it's Liam to take us through this.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Again, this is the report just for noting for the committee. It's the update on the care inspector grades for the registered services within social work or within the council. The background to this is that following the improvement notice that came out from the care inspector for the Hamilton service, it was felt that elected members in the committee needed to be cited on some of the grades across the service. So what we gave a commitment to do was to bring a 6-monthly report of care inspectorate grades for the service. So this is the first of that report. So this is the March one, and what we'll do is we'll bring a 6-monthly one in September, and we'll repeat that cycle throughout the years. You'll see within the report at section 3, in terms of the background, we've got 42 registered services which are inspected by the care inspectorate. Some of them are inspected annually, and that's predominantly the care homes, but others where it depends on what the service requirements or risks that are associated, and that would be highlighted by complaints, for example, from individuals to the care inspectorate. So it isn't an annual inspection for all services. You'll see within the report as well that we've made reference to the recent inspections that have taken place, and when I say recent, it was actually 2020 and 2019 for the Hamilton Blantyre care at home and also the Rutherglen care at home. Throughout the past year, the care inspector have actually stood down on routine inspections because of the pandemic and to minimise footfall for a lot of resources. So actually what we're doing is we're showing this is the most recent up-to-date grades that we have in the system.
Can you mute the dog, please?
Dog's muted, I think. So these are the most up-to-date grades that we've got. So you'll see some of them go back some time, and that would reflect that there wasn't any need for inspections. But obviously the care inspector have now told us that they're going to start the routine inspections as well towards the end of the year. So we'll start to see more upgrades as it comes. But we thought it would be useful to show for the committee to see the actual grades that we have at present. For the Hamilton Blantyre, just as a note of caution, that's still shown as the ones, but we've been notified by the care inspector that those grades have changed, and that's referenced at 3.5 within the report, and that's a 323. At the time of writing, it hadn't been updated, but I'm now advised that it has been updated within the care inspector's website, so that will reflect a difference in the reports going forward. So the report's there for noting for the committee, and I'm happy or any of the officers to take any questions with regards to any of the registered services that are mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Alan?
I apologise for the dog there, Chair. In 3.5, the Hamilton update following re-inspection, and the grades were upgraded for the home care worker. Did we not commission a report from a critical friend at that time? Have we had sight of that report when they were looking at the home care in the Hamilton area?
Liam?
Yeah, Chair, there was a report that was commissioned, and it was commissioned by the Chief Exec, and it's the Chief Exec that's got that report. So it would need to be, it would need to be directed towards the Chief Exec about the outcome of the report.
Okay, Alan.
Thank you.
Right. Item 15, items of urgent business. We haven't got any. However, I would just like to formally thank Val for our services to this committee and for raising the profile of South Lanarkshire in terms of the IJB to such that it's used as an exemplar throughout Scotland as to how things should be run. So well done, Val, and I'll have plenty of opportunity to speak to you again soon, but anybody else who wishes to endorse or speak, I'm quite happy to entertain that. Robert?
Yes, thanks very much. Could I add similar words to endorse what you've said in that regard? I think it's fair to say that Val's had quite a few challenges over the period of her time in office, one way or the other, which has always responded to with great dignity and commitment. And I hope that she will be very happy in her retirement from the post. The IJB is possibly, as you rightly say, one of the legacy things in which she's played a substantial part in establishing it.
Thanks, Robert. Graham?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to echo what Robert said, certainly from my perspective, Val, you're the second Director of Social Work that I've been involved in as a councillor in South Lanarkshire, and it's always been a joy to work with you. And I really appreciate all the support you've given us here in Avondale and across South Lanarkshire. So good luck and thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I've got no other items, so Jim?
Thank you very much, Chair. Really just to say that when Val came on the scene, we have actually seen a development of a completely new approach from the South Lanarkshire Council's social work department. And as Robert's indicated, that we also had the IJB as well. The one thing that I think that Val has always maintained is that when questions are raised or we are getting into debate, she's always willing and able to take a step aside and that essentially to put more information on the table to be able to do the decision making, and that's been in the way of our awareness sessions, etc. So I think that she's done excellent from that point of view, and that I wish her all the best in her retirement, and that hopefully it will be a long and happy retirement. But I'm sure that somebody will come knocking on her door saying, Val, could you just have a wee look at this for us, please? So all the best to you, Val. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I'll bring in Richard.
Well, I echo what Jim said, and Val, thank you. I think you've done an incredible job in a very difficult set of circumstances. I mean, you've been involved in the whole of the last 12 months, which on its own has been pioneering practically everything. And I think that, you have knocked heads together a bit with the IJB in terms of social care and the health service as well, and it's a difficult job. You're a cheerful person to work with too, which I enjoy, and you're always helpful. So all I can say there is many thanks for that, and good luck with your grandchildren. It's not retirement.
Okay, Val, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks very much to the whole committee and those who've spoken. Just been a real pleasure to work for South Lanarkshire Council. Absolutely, and this committee, it's been great because the level of interest and commitment to the detail has been really important, and I suppose we see it in the daycare discussion today. I think the commitment to the residents and constituents of South Lanarkshire is just so important to get a good understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. And I think we've had some really healthy, sometimes difficult discussions at committee, but actually if we can't have them at committee and afford the opportunity to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, then we're probably none of us doing what we should be doing well. So I just really thank you for that energetic discussion, and I've seen such commitment from all of you. So thank you very much for that. I hold fond memories of this committee and a few others as well, but mostly fond memories. Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks very much, John.
Thanks, Val, and thanks everybody for their attendance and their participation and I look forward to seeing you at the next committee. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chair.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Chair.